Thank you, thank you. First and foremost, what I'd like to say is thank you for inviting me here. I love doing these things, especially in this format, this smaller format, because I do a lot of speaking for LEAP. I'm one of their national speakers. And what you can do, depending on the format, I've spoke to crowds where it's a couple of hundred people, and sometimes you can get lost in the facts and doing either the PowerPoint or whatever, however you're delivering the message. And what I'd like to do with this, I say smaller group, is actually you ask the questions. I mean, get right to the point, ask me the questions, and I'll be glad to answer, your questions to the best of my ability. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, and a little bit about LEAP. LEAP is a 501(c) organization, which is a nonprofit. It is made up of over 150,000 members, mostly law enforcement, prosecutors, judges. We even have an international element tied in, MI5, which is the British equivalent to the FBI. So we are international, but all our members, you do not have to be prior law enforcement to join. Matter of fact, we've got a fair number of just citizens that are tired, basically, of the drug war, and our stance is it is time to stop the prohibition. So if you would, just get on its LEAP, leap.cc is our website. Get on that, and it's got all kinds of great information. I think earlier you mentioned an individual that it was tapped on the shoulder for the counter. Well, the nice thing about the LEAP website is there's tons of information as far as why we feel, that it's time to end prohibition and all, and it gives facts and figures about, when I say the drug war, and so, give him that website, or at least the leap.cc, and have him to get on that. I'm a retired DEA. I retired in 2008 from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I actually became a LEAP member after I retired from DEA. I actually did a couple of overseas tours. I went to Iraq and 2 tours of Afghanistan. And my last tour of Afghanistan, I was in Helmand Province, which is where the poppies, one of the biggest growing areas there in Afghanistan, which produces 90% of the world's heroin. And I had a chance. I was working in an intelligence billet, so I had access and was able to see a lot of what exactly is going on, I say, with that, as far as how they take the poppies, the drug lords over there, the Taliban, they use the profits that they make from selling the heroin, to fund, if you will, their war. Matter of fact, when I went to Iraq on my first tour, I'm at Ali al-Salim, which is one of the air bases that you fly through going into the Middle East. And I just ran into an individual that had retired from Border Patrol. And we just got to talking. I told him, I'd retired from DEA and all. One thing led to another, and basically he was a LEAP speaker. And so he told me, he says, hey, with your background and the way you feel, you should look into that. So when I finished my last tour, I got back home, I contacted LEAP and told them I'd like to be a speaker. And that was in 2012, and so for the last 3 years, I've been going to functions like this. The university, matter of fact, I'm going to the university here, Arizona State, like at the end of this month. There's a big, I say students, I think it's a student organization that's putting it together. I'll be speaking at that. But I guess the first and foremost thing that's in your mind is you want to know why would we want to legalize drugs in the first place? And what I can say is the number one priority and Leap's stance is we have to get the black market out of drugs, because as long as the black market is in drugs, i.e., and what I mean by that is you've got criminal organizations, whether it's the cartels, in law enforcement, we call it CCEs, which is continuing criminal enterprises, that they get into drugs, selling them, whatever. It's like gold. Drugs are a commodity. And what's really interesting is, at least according to DEA statistics, if you believe them all, though, 70% of the cartel's profits comes from weed alone. 70% of their profits come from weed. So the quickest way and the easiest way to actually cut the legs out from under them is to take that ability of them controlling it and us controlling it, i.e. taxing it, regulating it, and then taking, when I say taxing it, taking what you get and turning it back over into the community, whether it's education or even treatment. So that's the number one thing, and it will work. It's proven. I mean, history proves that the prohibition does not work. Matter of fact, that's how organized crime in the early days, if you go back to the late 20s, the 30s, that's how the Al Capones got so rich, built their, their criminal organizations. It's how the cartels, it started. I started my career in Miami. In those days, it was the Medellin and the Cali cartels, and eventually then as we basically got rid of and killed Escobar and the Ochoas and the various Colombian cartels, if you will, the Mexican cartels took over. And it is, matter of fact, drugs today, from going back even 40 years ago, they're more on the street, they're cheaper, and we haven't made a single impact. Matter of fact, I like to read about it. I like to get stats and see how, like, the government stats, how it compares to, what is written in history. And basically, we only intercept about 5%, and that's a high estimate. 5% of all the drugs that come through this nation. A low estimate is per year, over $500 billion comes through the U.S. economy per year. $500 billion. And if they say an estimate is if you were to tax it and regulate it, and all 50 states did it, it would create for the U.S. about $88 billion in revenue. Everything that's coming out of Colorado right now is very positive. This past year in 2014, tax revenue coming out of Colorado was about it was a little over $500,000. It was over $500 million. $500 million, actually. So, with that being said, I want you to ask me questions. Whatever's on your mind, like any questions that you have about either the initiative, if I can answer it, or what.
The head of the DEA recently, I just saw posted, he's still choosing marijuana still a Schedule 1. And I heard a rumor that the DEA is a corrupt organization.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I'm sure that there are cops. I'm sure there are cops.
Some other law enforcement people within the state here.
What's that?
So it's a rumor.
Well, in any organization, and that's the other thing. But it's a good point. It's a good point.
With all the evidence, how can they still keep it as Schedule 1?
Well, let's back up. Let's answer that. You're talking about when I say corrupt organization. First of all, that's one thing that the drug war produces is massive amounts of money. I mean, massive amounts. The average person just cannot comprehend how much. I mean, I've been in rooms where it is just wall-to-wall money. Hundreds of millions of dollars at a time. And that's not, in the early days, and this is old news, but it hasn't changed. when you go back to the Medellin cartel, they were making so much money, they were burying money because they couldn't launder it fast enough. They were burying it by the millions.
But where does that money go? It lines the pockets of the...
Well, what happens, what it then helps precipitate, when I say, is corruption. I was, had just got to Miami, and prior to that, and they had the big story, most of you probably never heard of it, but it was the Miami River Cops. And it was where Metro-Dade in Miami was actually, a number of cops were actually taking off cartel members, seizing their drugs, killing them, taking their drugs, and then selling it themselves, and having their own little, if you will, cartel. But that's just a very small number. You know, unfortunately, when it happens, if you talk out of every 100, you know, 2 cops are dirty, it gives a black eye to every cop. But I can assure you, mostly when I say DEA, they're probably the most vetted entity on the planet. It's harder to get into the DEA than it is the CIA. So, and then you had another question. What was the other one? When was the corruption? And then there was something that I don't know. Think about it.
And I saw the U.S. Border Patrol numbers, and I couldn't believe the amount of money in marijuana that is seized on an annual basis. Now, my thought and my theory is they may delay rescheduling as long as they can, because this federal seizure of marijuana far outweighs every other drug compiled and put together. The money that they, or the marijuana that they bring in.
Right.
Now, do they destroy this giant commodity, or where does that go when they seize this precious
where does the money
commodity?
go?
This is a very precious commodity. I can't imagine they're just...
Border Patrol is part of justice. And so what happens when DEA seizes money, when any of the Department of Justice entities, ATF and all, when they seize money, it goes into a big pot. And then that pot of money, all the different agencies get to draw from it. At one time, DEA actually was the only entity in the federal government that could totally fund itself. And part of it was because we were just seizing so much.
But not that, the product itself, the marijuana, not the money.
Okay, where does the product go?
Where's all that product?
They burn it.
It gets destroyed. It gets destroyed.
Yeah.
And actually, I've been on many, like in New Mexico, I used to go out being, I was a drug custodian, a drug and non-drug custodian. And so we'd go out in Kirtland, and we'd actually destroy it. We'd get together with the Air Force, their EOD individuals, and we'd go out and actually have to, we'd put plastic explosives, we'd have an area as big as this building, footprint, and we'd bring all the drugs in and we'd just stack it. And then we would put plastic explosive over it, and we'd detonate it, and they'd vaporize it and all. And then they got to the point where that was so bad at Kirtland because it would create such a, actually all the sensitive instruments that's on Kirtland, because it's a big scientific research area, they'd have to recalibrate all their instruments, you know, and it would cost big money to do that. And so finally they said, you can't do this anymore, and so that we would travel down to El Paso and put it in incinerators. Medical waste, and said they had some company there that did medical waste and stuff, and then we also could do the drugs.
So we have a conflict of interest because capturing these people as criminals and confiscating the money and confiscating the drug brings money to the DEA and other law enforcement, things. But there's a huge expense in incarcerating all of these so-called criminals and then having to pay welfare for their families that they leave behind. And that, the money doesn't go back to fund
One of the biggest, fastest growing industries in America is building prisons, jails.
Yes,
They're
here in Arizona,
privatized. They're privatized.
Yes.
In fact, America has about 5% of the world's population,
Yes.
and we incarcerate 25%. We have 25% of
Yes.
our, when I say
That's
population.
been well established. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And that in itself is criminal. You know, when you think about it, but we're building literally, when I say the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing entities is building prisons, and it's self-perpetuating. So the more that we arrest in this, you have to house them somewhere, and so then more prisons come up. And the thing is what the very means when you privatize something, what are you doing it for? It's to make a profit. So.
But the DEA has the power to reclassify this drug. Am I wrong about
Well,
that?
that is where to start. I think you mentioned something about being Schedule 1 or something. But Schedule 1, that is where you actually have to put the emphasis. If you really want major change, is you have to go against, get that changed. Get it taken off from the Schedule 1. Wow. So,
Is that an administrative action or a congressional action?
What would, say
well,
that
you know,
question
DEA does, that's a good question, to be honest with you. I really don't know, but I know that DEA is in charge of, like for just regular drugs, for doctors and stuff, we actually have an entity that's part of it that's called Diversion. And Diversion is who checks on all, like the doctors when we talk about the pharmaceuticals and stuff. And so I would imagine that DEA would definitely have a big input as far as whether it's a Schedule 1, Schedule 2, or Schedule 3. So I mean, that's a good place to start.
Over here.
that guy does.
Look, go ahead.
Okay, LEAP, you guys don't want to just legalize marijuana. You want to legalize all drugs, heroin, cocaine, everything, right?
That is correct. Absolutely, because, and just to speak on that briefly, because really what we're talking about today is cannabis, but the reason we're talking would include the other drugs is because right now, the way it is in America, the only way you get treatment, if you are an addict, you know, a heroin addict or something, is really you have to get arrested. You have to have an encounter with law enforcement. You have to get arrested, and the judge has to pretty much sentence you to treatment. Where we don't treat it as a medical issue, and it should be a medical issue because you've got to have it. You are, addicted to it. That's right. Yes, sir.
Could you speak to how cartels would be affected by having a legal market up here?
By how they would be affected? Well, first of all, you would cut their legs out from under them, i.e., because they are the black market. They control the price of drugs, and it would get children pretty much out of it because they know the cartels are very, when I say smart, they're savvy. It's all about the money, period. And they don't care who gets killed or dies in the end. And so they will use children a lot to sling their drugs. And so by legalizing, taxing, controlling it, basically you would definitely at least get the child element out of it. Plus they are armed better than the regular military. They have the latest of every, when I say weapon systems, at one point they had the same radios that we were using. They have the frequencies and stuff. Most of you don't know this, but believe it or not, they put in a lot of money, and this was years ago. This is back in the 90s. So the 90s, I remember going out on deals and stuff, and we'd have a brick phone. That's what we called it, a brick phone. It was one phone per group. Now everybody has their smartphone and stuff, but back in, like in 90, 91, they were just coming out with it, so we had these big brick phones. Believe it or not, the cartels put a lot of money. Prior to that, the only thing that was available was satellite phones. And they put a lot of money into just the research and all that went into developing that. Why? To protect their loads, so they could have it on a ship 50 miles offshore and communicate. Yes, sir.
Nice to have you back, see you again.
Oh, thank you.
I was wondering, I watched some of these countries like Portugal, it's 2001, basically legalized drugs.
Yes.
Did you have an opinion on that?
That
Supports the league?
I have used that example, and some of the question was it was a question about Portugal, because in 2001 they legalized all drugs. Okay, and I have used that example in some of my speaking engagements that they, when I say took that step out on the limb to see what would happen, and actually it's very positive. The information that's coming out of Portugal is, when I say like a role model, it's almost like the role model, i.e. what Colorado is setting up, the way they've done things and stuff. That's kind of a role model. Matter of fact, I believe the whole initiative here in Arizona for November of 16 next year is based on the Colorado initiative, or they're legalizing marijuana. So, come on, keep the questions coming.
So how do we get the politicians and the police in Arizona to
engage them? I don't like to, a lot of times in this, it's always, you have to be careful with the speech that you use with this. A lot of times we call it a debate. The debate's done. It's over with. There is no debate anymore. It is facts. The drug war, the prohibition, it's failed totally. And you just have to, when I say engage them, talk to them, tell them, like, okay, why do they still feel that what they're doing is working? When you can show with facts and figures, that, hey, it's not. I mean, we've got 40 years of time to show that it's a failed policy.
The problem I have talking to legislators, and I've talked to a number of them, is that they won't look at anything. They know what marijuana is. They know it's bad. They don't need to look at anything about it. It's getting that mindset is the problem. Because if they won't look at something with the thing that, maybe I'm wrong, then you're never going to change it.
But with that being said, the other thing is a lot of the onus is on our individual shoulders, each and every one of you. You've got to get out, you've got to engage your friends, you've got to talk about it. If you don't say anything, nothing will get done. But if you engage them and you set up, matter of fact, this is how, when I say you spread the message, between now and then, right now, in history, it's somewhere between, 54 and 56% of the voting public nationwide is totally for regulating, changing. Whether it's regulating, creating laws to
They have to show up.
legalize, marijuana, it's there. It's just getting out and getting, when I say talking to your friends, and when it comes time to vote, getting out there and doing it. Because it will change.
I like to call it drug war a jobs program for cops. And in that sense, I mean that the cops love the drug war because it gives them high-paying jobs, and they don't want to end it for that reason.
Well, there's a lot that can be said about that. Matter of fact, every one of you here can look how the cops have become militarized through the years. It's gone from actually being, a public, when I say a public servant, to protect and serve, to where now, anytime that a raid is done, 9 times out of 10, they have that up-armored vehicle, they're crashing the door, armored. Matter of fact, going back even years, I had a case, and I love to tell stories, because sometimes through stories, you can get, it just brings everything alive, The FBI, one thing that they do with the way they like to serve warrants, if you will, is a lot of times they will call someone out. Okay, they'll actually get on the loudspeaker and say, hey, we got the place surrounded, and come out with your hands up, that type of thing. DEA, they don't do that, period, for the most part. It is every time you go to a house, the door is going to practically come off its hinges, around. It is a raid. I had a case where it was a marijuana grow. It was in Florida, and this is one of the cases that started me thinking, like, what is going on here? Why? I had to almost beg and plead my supervisor at the time to. I told him, I said, we don't need to go into the trailer, with the halogen tool. There's a special tool because trailers, their doors open to the out. So you have to have a halogen tool like what firemen have, and you have to hit it right and be able to open that door, in a split second. And it takes practice. And so we didn't have anyone in the team that had really, we had the RAM, and that's good for knocking doors in. And so I'm thinking to myself, this is my case, It's like, I told my boss, I said, you know what, I really don't want to do it that way, tear up the guy's trailer and stuff. I said, let's just call him out. So, well, he trusted me. I mean, I say, I got the gift of the golden tongue, so he says, okay, we'll do it your way, Finn. And so we surrounded the place, and I called the guy out. Well, long story short, this guy was a Vietnam vet, and it wasn't even his grow. All he was doing was watching it. It was like 50, and in those days that was a huge grow. It was 1,500 plants in a Quonset hut. And when all was said and done, the guy helped us. He helped the government, because usually that's DEA's hammer too when we work with the state and locals. Because if we come in, then we can always threaten the big hammer. The big hammer is this will go federal if you don't cooperate with the state. Okay? And anyhow, the guy cooperated, did everything he could. And what we found out in the term is a week later, if I had hit the place a week later, he would have been gone anyway. He was moving to Vietnam with his girlfriend. He was just one of these peaceful guys. He had been a combat photographer on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Just really a very humble person. He was just watching this place. It wasn't even his grow, and he helped us try to get it. Well, the judge didn't believe that the government should make any deals with drug dealers, no matter what. And so even though the prosecutor was a good friend of mine, he totally 100% agreed. He says, let's go to maximum reduction. He did try to help. We presented it to the judge, and the judge pretty much just said, nope. And he hit him with the hardest sentence he possibly could hit. He got 25 years. The guy's still in prison.
I'd like to learn more about the opponents of re-legalization or decriminalization, whatever you want to call it. The opponents. What are their motives? I understand about the greedy cops. I mean, the road cops. They just want to be bullies. Asset forfeiture, which grant great amount of money into the police department.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Asset forfeiture.
Maryland, New Mexico just abolished that. How's that coming out?
You know what? I haven't really followed it that close.
That's a state law, of course. The feds wouldn't be affected.
Yes, right, exactly. And that's the reason they were actually when I was still living there.
But the social conservatives, I heard Montgomery, that is the county attorney here, on a stage a couple months ago. There is some kind of this mania, and I understand the profit motive that some people have.
Right.
I mean, you could fantasize about big tobacco or drug companies. If you want to make a conspiracy, you can do that. But what's really moving them? Why are they opposed to legalizing?
They say it's for the children.
Nonsense! We know that's silly.
Tell them why that doesn't hold water. Isn't teen drug use actually declining across the nation?
Once you remove the forbidden fruit label.
Well, that's true. That's what they found out in Colorado. I think let's try to answer a little bit of asset forfeiture. They created asset forfeiture actually to go against organized crime, okay, and to get the CCEs, the continuing criminal enterprises, and then they just applied it to the drug war. And of all things, matter of fact, at one point in time, historically, the FBI was getting extremely, even though we're both justice, DEA and FBI is both justice, they were getting extremely irritated at the fact that we were putting a lot of these organized crime heads into jail. Now, along with that, that's some of the positive stuff, but along with that, you get a lot of people, too, that go into jail on the drug war, because when I say at the federal level, is one thing. Yes, DEA is, we're the only federal entity at one time that was, our sole purpose was just to enforce what we call Title 21. That's the federal narcotics laws. But since that time, everybody wants to get in a piece of the pie, the money. Okay? And so the forest rangers, they actually have a Title 21 type because they'll grow weed sometimes in the forest, that type of thing. But that gives them that nexus. Now they get that piece of pie. And then the government comes in And what they'll do is, like, if a place is called a high-intensity drug trafficking area, and I'm pretty sure Phoenix is considered a HIDA area, and so then what happens is when all the local entities throughout Arizona, not just close by, but I mean the small sheriff's office and town, 50 miles away from here or whatever, they're still in that corridor. If you were to look at the you've got I-40 coming out of LA, and then you got I-25 or 10, I mean, down south. But if you're along that corridor anywhere, that's a drug trafficking corridor. And so any entity that lives along that is willing to enforce drug laws, then they will get grants, get money from the government. They'll pay them. They'll get those up-armored vehicles. Sometimes that's why the military has become, the police forces have become very, very militarized. I mean, they practically look like military troops in their uniforms now. And part of that it is truly, I kid you not, the reason DEA wears black, and it's very intimidating. Now, part of it, you can make an argument. I mean, what we're told, and part of it is, when you see someone coming into a house, it's very intimidating, especially if you have a machine gun, you're dressed in black, and your face is all blacked out. You're wearing, your baklava, and you've got a machine gun. That's scary. And so someone could make an argument, well, we do it for that. But does all cops have to dress like that? So anyhow, asset forfeiture was created to actually take down these CCEs, and then we just applied it because it's very easy to just apply it over to the drug war. And we've taken, matter of fact, we were at one point, DEA alone was arresting 75% of the individuals that was in prison back in about 1995. Now that may have changed, somewhat, but in '95 we were putting in 75% of all people in federal prisons. And then there was one other thing that you.
Well, I was asking about the motives of the opponents of our movement. And, I know about forfeiture, that's clear, and, bully cops, I suppose. But what about some high-minded people, the social conservatives? Why are they so ignorant?
Thank you. Ignorance.
I don't know.
They're not high.
But they're ignorant.
Social conservatives, that's what the
Education changes everything.
That's it. They need an education. They're not ignorant. They just are in need
That's
of
ignorance.
the education.
That's ignorance. If you are not
Actually,
educated about something,
ignorance
it's
is
ignorance.
lack of knowledge.
It's true.
Ignorance is
when
lack of knowledge.
someone
Not that you're
hears-
stupid. Matter of fact, ignorant. When you're ignorant,
No,
doesn't mean you're stupid or
it's
anything.
lack of-
It's lack of knowledge.
Yes.
That's what it
It's
means.
just, it's one of those
And
words.
so what I say about that comment is, if you want to be a force or a voice of influence with the people who have an opposing view, you have got to speak their language.
Yes.
You cannot stand there in your pot shirt and be passionate. You have got to be low key and speak to these people. No, when I went to the Arizona Board of Regents meeting, let me tell you what I'm dealing with. I look at that panel of people. These are millionaires.
Yes.
These are successful, high-powered people. They're used to dealing with highly educated individuals. I cannot go in there and speak like a buffoon. I have got to speak their language and use their terminology against them.
And
So
their
if you want to
Yes.
influence them, that's what you've got to do. And people who are supporters of marijuana generally are people who are like, accept me for who I am. Love me for who I am. It's a game. You have got to play it. You have got to dress appropriately. You have got, if you want to be a person of influence, you've got to look like them, dress like them, act like them, speak like them. You will gain no leeway with them.
If you have the stoner, when I
Yes.
quote unquote the stoner attitude, and you show up at these, and I've been to functions where
Yeah.
there's that
Don't listen.
one element that is, I say well spoken, and then there's that element that they're the stoners, you know,
I don't listen.
and it's almost comical.
Yes.
It really is, and it takes away from the credibility. Doesn't mean that they're saying anything wrong. You got to love everybody, but at the same time, if you're going to engage the enemy, so to say,
Speak their language.
then you got to speak their language. You got to know the enemy, and you got to know exactly what they're saying and where they're coming from. But that's why I said earlier, we've got 40 years of data. 40 years, you know, actually 40 years plus. We go back, we can say 70 years. We went back to the 30s and we went back to Prohibition. We could use that also, you know. And I don't think anyone can argue when you say, what you know what the definition, and this has probably been way overused, but the definition of insanity is, and it's doing the same thing all the time and expecting a different result, you know. And that's where we're at this point in time.
I just would be interested in your comments and thoughts on El Chapo Guzman, who recently escaped.
Yes.
Just your thoughts. I mean,
Just my thoughts?
yeah, just what do you think of
Well,
him and
well, that's an interesting question because a lot of that, when you talk to cartels, I mean, you go back even, and it's really funny just lately. Has everybody in here seen the show Breaking Bad?
Oh, yes.
They watch that? You like that? How about Narcos? They watch, anybody see Narcos on the Netflix?
Oh, no.
No? Okay, Narcos is when I say like Breaking Bad, like brought the meth world kind of like, you know, how it works and stuff. And the money that's made 100% accurate. I mean, again, the money's just absolutely crazy, and that's why they do it. I mean, they put poison in it. Narcos is all about the cartels in Colombia, the Medellin and the Cali, how they work together and all. And it's really kind of about Escobar and how he ran things. And he built his own prison. Guzman, El Chapo, when he escaped, I want to say he had the tunnel. I don't know if I'm going too far here, but it may have even been paid, you know. But it was just like really, they got so much money that they do these eccentric, crazy things. You know, in jail, like when Escobar was in jail, it wasn't a jail. I mean, he had his family in a little house, like right down the road from the prison. You come visit him. You know, they bring in all his crew, basically, was there to protect him. He was more protected. As a matter of fact, part of the jail it protected him from some of the competition that was actually getting mad at him and ready to, you know, try to kill him. Exactly, you know. And that's the way it works. These enterprises. I mean, not that long ago.
would you assume then that obviously, apparently he had help from the government of Mexico?
Oh, without question, without question. Again, part of that is the money they pay off the cops, the prosecutors, the judges, and then if they are truly honest people, they get killed.
Take the money
Then they become targets.
take the
Money or bullet.
Then they become targets. So, you know, and that's why we have to. I mean, I think personally, and again, you know, but one of the most important issues that we have right now is it's still about drugs. Even today, I mean, 2015, forget marijuana. It is about stopping this drug war, stopping the cartels because they are better. They're armies. They make more money. The cartels make more money than most nation states. And when you have that kind of money, it's very, very corrupting. Yes, sir.
You said that like 10, 15 years ago, that 75% of the people in federal prisons were put there by the DEA.
DEA. Yes,
The
back in
numbers
about 93, 95, right that time frame.
The numbers currently I have are about 51% of the people in federal prisons are there for victimless drug war crimes. That comes from the Bureau of Prison Statistics. Well, my question is has the number of people in federal prisons significantly dropped it seems like what you're saying, comparing your statistic, and I used to quote Reason
No,
magazine.
because DEA was the main player in the game at that time.
Well, I mean, so there are-
now everybody, it's all these other entities that are arresting.
Well, no, my point was, like I said, the number I have, 51%, that is from the U.S. Bureau of Prisons, and that is for drug war offenses. You know, not just
Okay.
marijuana, but all of them. And
Okay.
I used to quote Reason magazine from about 10, 15 years back, and they used to say 2/3 of the people in all prisons were there for victimless drug war crimes. But from what it seems like, that statistic has dropped over the years. Are you aware of that, or you just quoting a number from your days?
I'm just quoting a number from my time. What could have something
Well, I'm just curious.
when I
It's like,
say
you know,
to
not
do
curious, you-
I'm curious.
with the difference when I say, and again, what are we talking about? When you talk about federal cases, okay? There was a time in Miami, if I had I could not do a case unless I had 5 kilos. Okay? The U.S. Attorney's Office did not have time to do anything that was less than 5 kilos. So you gave it to the locals or whatever, you know? But now, you know, a lot of, because you've got all these other little police departments, 5 kilos, they'll jump on 5 kilos in a second. That's a lot of drugs. Where in Miami in those days, that was nothing, because it came in by the shiploads, the tons, literally. Yes.
When you do like debating and whatnot, what's the biggest argument you're hearing from the other side? Basically, that this is not the route that we need to go. Are they so scared that it's going to be like a DWI checkpoint every week because everybody's out there getting high? What's the biggest argument that they have to say, you know what? Or is it something along the lines of like law enforcement, and how would we fund even our city police if we take away the drug aspect? What do they say? What's their thing? Is it we don't want a high society? We don't want people being feeling good? What's the deal?
I think the biggest thing that I get with Montgomery and all is what they try to say is, they're looking at the damage it does, when I say to society, but they're taking, when I say old facts, matter of fact, he uses, some of his figures is absolutely, it's like, I don't even know where he
I have an email that's crazy right now.
but it's they look at it as like, well, drugs, period, are bad.
Let's get rid of
And-
OxyContin.
Yeah, but they don't
Yes.
relate it to any
Right,
pharmaceutical.
Here.
You know,
Jeez.
right? Drugs, absolutely. Drugs. I mean, you've got Dilaudid, OxyContin, and all, and they all have their purpose. But anything in excess will kill. I mean, you take too much OxyContin, you're gonna overdose. You take too much Dilaudid, that's pharmaceutical heroin, you're gonna overdose. But it's all in controlling it, and that's what basically would be, at this point, is the best thing to do, is tax it, regulate it, and do just like what Colorado has done. Matter of fact, all this data that's coming out of Colorado is very positive. All the things that they thought was going to happen is actually hasn't happened. It's, drug usage is going to go up. Actually, there was a tiny spike initially, and then now it's just down. The novelty is over with, and you take that element out. And I used to work actually in prevention. A little bit of the DEA had actually a program that dealt with prevention, working with schools and stuff. And so one of the things that they talk about in prevention is, when I say education and all, they had to, everybody in here has heard of the DARE program. But what's really interesting about the DARE program is that basically that was a total failure. Did not work at all. We look right now at kids. It's easier for kids to get a hold of weed than it is for them to get alcohol. Matter of fact, that's one of the things I say with your generation. My son, he's here today. Isn't that when you were in high school? Would you say that it was easier to get weed, or was it easier to get alcohol.
Definitely. I guess the big thing is like that slippery slope. I think that they're always comparing like marijuana as like this gateway, and that's like their argument is that it's a gateway, and then you're going to be doing heroin next week, and if you're doing heroin, then you're going to be doing coke the following week, and then you're going to die of an overdose.
Right.
And there's no statistics on,
Well, there's no
anybody ever
correlation.
overdosing,
No,
or that it even being a true gateway. But they've made this up and they've lied for so long. I feel like with the DARE programs and stuff like that. Did they ever tell you guys, like, just give you horrible statistics to go and lie to the public, or was it just an accident? This whole DARE program and what they were kind of spewing out, because I feel like that's the big problem with the DARE thing and why it was so bad was that people realized they were being lied to for so long, and that's why it had a real kickback instead of. And my question really is was that something that you felt was kind of preconceived before they went into the classrooms, or was it just, well, I don't have anywhere else to answer besides you get high once and you could die, and that's why people got pissed. I feel like. No, I know, but that's what they tell people in DARE.
I think that was probably a little bit
But
about it.
see, so education is at the heart and the base of everything. In and I know this is an analogy or a metaphor, but in Texas, where they teach abstinence-only programs for sex ed, pregnancy rates skyrocket. This is true. This is fact.
Yeah.
And marijuana, the same thing. If you're going to tell people lies, or tell them it's just plain evil, don't touch it, they're going to experiment. But if you give them factual scientific data, they're going to make informed choices.
Yeah, right.
And that's what we should be doing, because it does reduce use when people know the truth.
Yeah.
You can't forever tell some girl, sit on a dirty toilet seat, you could get pregnant. That is not true. That is not reality. Nor can you say if it's legitimate rape, the body has a way to shut that down. That is not scientific. We have a lot of information in our communities right now that just simply aren't truth. It's scare tactics. And you know what? Kids are smarter than they think.
They're savvy.
They know a lie when they see it.
Absolutely.
I love your statement. It's easier for a child to get marijuana right now than alcohol. Where did you get that information? If I would make that statement, somebody said, where do you get that information from? Where did that come from?
Go to any school.
This is
Go to any school.
This is just
I'm
life.
literally just, it is life. It is 100%.
Law enforcement guy.
But I like that. I believe that.
Let's quote.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Sid.